think this is a great honor to talk to a bunch of attorneys. It really is. I got my start in surveying in Knoxville, Tennessee. I surveyed with my grandfather in the 50s and 60s in Mountain City, Tennessee. So somebody, I think Mark mentioned Mountain City yesterday. Right. All right. I've placed my email address on there. It is pls1004@gmail.com. I am presently working with Gresham Smith and Partners, but as of April the 14th, I will be leaving Gresham Smith and Partners. I will be starting work with the firm to be their program director of engineering and survey. Now, you look at those numbers up there, top number, what is that top number? Everybody looks at surveyors to be a number cruncher. What's that top number represent to you? 95 counties in the state of Tennessee. Second number, I have surveyed. Yeah, leave it to me, mess something up. I don't know if I'll need this, but we'll give it a shot. Okay, 80, that's the number of counties I have conducted surveys in. 68, that's my age. 1004, that's my license number. 275 plus or minus, that's all the surveyors below me that are still active. Most of them have passed away or have retired. I knew the number 1, 2, 3, 4 licensed surveyors. Jim, don't say anything. Okay. So then 56. That's the average age of a surveyor in the United States. Over 56, half of the surveyors in the United States are over 56. They are beginning to retire. There's a surveyor in Oregon who is 99 years old, still surveying. He works for the federal government, and he marks out property lines and takes care of encroachments. And he uses robotic survey equipment. Doesn't do it the old style. 3194, that's the last number that will be issued when somebody passes the exam for the Tennessee land surveyors. So you take away, it'll probably be the time they get that, you take away the first 1,000. The other people above it, you'll probably have 1,500, 1,600 surveyors in the state of Tennessee. So we were talking yesterday about how we've got a gap. We're going to have a big gap in land surveying. Just like you probably have a gap in land title work. I'll get this straight. Okay, Mountain City to Memphis. I have surveyed in Mountain City, and I surveyed in Memphis. I came down here 10 years ago to Middle Tennessee, and this has expanded my horizons to be able to work in a lot of other counties. All right. This is my favorite one. Surveyors eliminate mistakes. That is true. I've always taught that. We make a mistake once, we don't make it again. Errors are different for surveyors than they are for engineers and attorneys, because every piece of equipment we use has an inherent error in it. You cannot measure anything exactly. Keep that in mind. If you ever hear of a surveyor say it's exactly 100 feet, he doesn't know what he's talking about, because you cannot measure anything exactly. You can count numbers exactly, the number of people in this room. But I like this T-shirt. I'm a land surveyor. I don't argue. I just explain why I am right. When you look at this, these are just some of the qualifications for a surveyor. Top on the list: mathematician, artist, researcher, historian, politician. Why is he going to have to be a politician? Oh, yeah. He has to be a politician when you're working against two property owners surveying their property. So you have to be able to be diplomatic with them. A draftsperson, it used to be you draw everything by hand. Now we use CAD. You have to be an athlete. Think about it. I don't look like one now, but climbing fences, going up and down hills. Middle Tennessee, the surveyors down here think that these are mountains. You go to Knoxville, right, Jim? Tree identification. We have to know the trees. We have to know what the trees are without the leaves on them. Because the old deeds went to hickory trees. But you had to know what kind of hickory tree. There's more than just one. There's more than one just oak tree. Cat operator, knowledge of the law. That's the sticky part because I'm not a lawyer, but I have to have knowledge of property law and survey law. And I have to keep up with that because it changes every year. What I do is I go to the webpage for the state appeals that go all the way through to the Supreme Court, and I look at those every year to see what in there affects survey. That is a great resource. You have to be a writer, interpreter, and a decision maker. A writer. You have to write what I call land descriptions, not legal descriptions. That's left to the attorney. We will write the land description for you. It was mentioned yesterday, I think, by Mark, that people were saying, well, we always wrote our own land descriptions. I remember back in the early 80s, there was a surveyor up in Jefferson County who refused to write a land description for this attorney. And he called me up and I said, yeah, that's our job. That's in our standards of practice. Now, I have changed up my presentation after yesterday from what's in the book that I gave to Lisa with everything that's in there. But the writing land descriptions is a very, very critical part of what you do. Whenever anybody gets our survey, I expect them to go through and correct the spelling, the punctuation in there, and compare it against the survey. Because when we create a land description, we take it from our survey, but sometimes there's rounding errors. You get out there and you get 45 degrees, 2 minutes, 10 seconds. It might show up as 11 seconds. But a paralegal will catch it and say, hey, that's 11 seconds, Ken, that's not 10. I go, 1 second, that's not that much in a survey. Because when I started surveying, we didn't use seconds, we did degrees and minutes. Do you remember that long ago, Jim? Okay. Anybody know what that is? Chains, links. That's what my grandfather used. He measured out tobacco allotments. When I was 6 years old, we'd go out and measure out tobacco allotments. He explained to me how critical it was because if we went over 10%, they went 10% over their acreage, we got to cut the tobacco down. So what he did, he would go out beforehand, lay out their lot for their tobacco, and take it up just right at 109%, so we wouldn't have to cut anything down, because if they went 10% over what the government allowed them, you cut it down. But he had a side business. He would lay it out before he would get out there. Okay. That's a transit. You don't see surveyors use that anymore. But that's what I started surveying with in the 70s, was using a transit. But we used a steel tape, which we called a chain, and there were 4 of us on a crew. Now we've got GPS, one-man operation. We have robotic equipment. That is a robotic piece of equipment. See the antenna on it, it'll communicate over to a data collector. Your surveyor standing out there with a prism. He's gathering all that data, and it just turns and rotates and finds it. I was the first one in the state of Tennessee at my age that saw the use for this and bought the very first one in the state of Tennessee. $60,000. Nowadays, surveyors, the price has come down, but for a surveyor to outfit his truck, I'm giving this for a reason because of the cost of surveys. When he outfits his truck with the value of his truck and his equipment, he's put in over $100,000 of equipment. That's not just the office equipment either. Okay. I learned from two attorneys in Knoxville that have now passed away, which was Guy Shanks and Bill Blackstock. They were sort of my mentors as attorneys. Jim Bondurant is one of my mentors. I do not know everything what you have to do. I can't make the legal decision. But I learned early on, Bill and Guy said the lawyers think the land surveyors don't understand what lawyers are supposed to do, and the surveyors think the lawyers don't understand what the surveyors are supposed to do. That is a statement from a seminar in 1965. Okay? What I learned from Bill and Guy, Jim Bondurant, Lee Owenby, Myron Ely, all these guys up in Knoxville, is that this is what we do, this is what we expect of you, but it was a cooperation. We worked together. I would go to the office and meet with Jim, Bill, any of them, and sit down and go through the survey if I had a problem. So they would understand what I'm running into, and they would understand what my opinion of it would be. Then they would give their opinion, and then they would agree with me. Okay? All right. Location of the property boundaries depicted here on based on the appropriate boundary law principles. This statement we put on every survey now. It gets back to our insurance coverage. We want everybody to know that we're issuing an opinion. We're getting the facts, and we're issuing an opinion. I feel like when I issue an opinion that it's as close as it can be. We approach every survey like we're going to be sued. That's the only way to approach it. Now, some of this is in the handout material you got, but again, I did change this some. This is something that bothers me about our present surveying practice. In the state of Tennessee, we have 3 categories of surveys, 1, 2, and 3. This was on a recent survey we did. It was a category 3 up in the mountains, and you see down here it says the ratio of precision for the unadjusted survey is 1 in 5,312, as shown here on. There are surveyors out there, if you do a category 1, they'll say the ratio of precision is 1 in 10,000. That's the requirement for a category 1. But when you see a surveyor, on his survey, he's got, I did this and it's 1 in 10,000. No way. Because that means that you're only off a foot in 10,000 feet. You can't do that. If you do that, you're lucky. You need to be above the 10,000. You need to be up, show what it actually is. I've never done a survey that said exactly 1 in 10,000. We do them, and they're going to be 1 in 31,256. That's a number. But we close these things out. That's a precision that we have to meet. And if you see somebody that's got 1 in 10,000, ask them about it. Ask the surveyor. I have reviewed for 5 years through the Department of Insurance complaints against surveyors by contract with Gresham Smith and Partners. And this was one of my pet peeves that surveyors were not doing this. And that's in our standards of practice. What the surveyor does, he puts that on there. He may not even close it out. Not every surveyor does this, but I want to point it out to you. You have to watch, because this you're issuing title insurance on a survey that needs to meet the standards of practice. Now, I'm not trying to belittle my surveying practice and my fellow surveyors out there, but this is a point we have several people do not obey those rules. What they will do, they will go out there, they will find the property corner, do a quick survey, and they will issue a survey to you, and you look at that and you say, oh, bearing, distance matches the last survey 20 years ago exactly. No way. Not with the equipment we have today. It can't match a survey 40 years ago. I can't match myself on a survey because I go out there, I still have to use the equipment, and you got variances which affect that. So when you see a survey come into your office and it's got the same bearings and distances that was on the last survey, ask a question. I don't know if you want to, but you might say, did you really survey this? Or what was your bearings and distances? I'm not asking y'all to police surveying, but you need to be knowledgeable of what you are getting. We are the first ones on a piece of property, and you see all this construction going on downtown. The company I work for, we do the survey for the closing, an ALTA survey. We do the construction stakeout on the property. Then when we finish, we do the final as-built. We're the first ones on, and we're the first ones to leave. The as-built, most likely you're going to have an as-built to do the final loan closing, so we will be there to do that. And surveying is the oldest profession in the world, because you go back to the original into the Old Testament. Joshua was the first surveyor. He was marching around the walls of Jericho measuring them. Okay. Types of surveys. You have many types of surveys, but the ones that you all are most interested in would be boundary surveys and ALTA surveys. All those others are surveys that we conduct. But those are good sources for us in conducting a boundary survey, because there will be information there that we can use. The one up here, number 5, mortgage survey. That is in the standards of practice, or in the law, it allows what they call non-monumented surveys. Can anybody tell me what a non-monumented survey is? It's a drive-by. Guys would get out of the truck, go out there, they'd draw the house up, find a couple of property corners, and measure it off to the fences there. Okay, the house is on the property, doesn't violate any standards, doesn't violate setbacks. That is a non-monumented survey. We have no standards of practice for it. I can take a survey and make it look like a real survey. And attorneys would probably think it's a real survey, but it would be a non-monumented survey. So you have to be careful. When I was starting in East Tennessee, we did everything as a boundary survey. We set the property corners. Middle Tennessee, they did it sort of both ways. They leaned towards mortgage surveys. And West Tennessee did like what we did in East Tennessee. They went and say, hey, we want to do actual boundary surveys. So there were, if anybody remembers, there were 3 grand divisions in the state of Tennessee: East, Middle, and West. And surveyors sort of segregated themselves. This is back in the 70s that they like to do things differently. And that's where we tried to tighten down on our standards of practice. Air right surveys. How many in here has worked with air right surveys? Okay. Renaissance Hotel downtown. The top, let's see, I think 6 or 7 floors it's owned by somebody else than the Renaissance Hotel underneath it. So we did a survey for the top. We had to establish the elevation of the floors. We had to go up the stairwells. And we used laser technology to get the elevation. The elevation had to be to a real benchmark elevation that we have downtown working off USGS. So we have done air right surveys. Again, an ALTA survey can encompass the topographic survey too, and it is a boundary survey, because when you are ordering a survey from a surveyor on ALTA, I'll keep you awake this morning, I promise. I think from hearing a lot of y'all, you were out partying last night to 12 o'clock, and I was in bed at 12 o'clock. Table A, is everybody familiar with Table A? About fences?
Fences. I want to set up a fence. I need a survey. Which one of those in the order?
Boundary. That's the very top survey. In state Tennessee, it's called a general property survey. This is the definition in the standards of practice, but it is a boundary survey. Mm-hmm. Oh, it does. And I didn't put that on there, but I worked for the Division of Surface Mining back in the 80s also. I did my survey and I worked for what they call the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation as an engineer. So I was assistant director of surface mining up there. And I saw the miners going in the tunnels, saw the surveyors going in there, and their tripods were about this tall, and they would survey in, but they would have their control outside, and they would survey in, and they would map it so to see where they were with the surface and where they were so they would not be past the boundary lines. They asked me one day, said, do you want to go in there? I said, no. If anybody ever finds me in a deep mine, coal mine, they'll know it, and I'm dead. It was murder. Because I'm not going back in there. But yes, knowing where they are underground is very critical, not so much for being underneath somebody's, for, standpoint of title, going past that boundary and stealing somebody's coal. If there's a mine cave-in, they need to know where they can go rescue those miners. And there's been some cases like that where they use GPS outside. They say, start going here. And they did this in Pennsylvania. And they went down, they came right into where the miners were able to rescue. That's how important surveying is. Forgive me for not putting up there that on subsurface. Mm-hmm. Knowledge. Oh, it is. It's everything we do for a commercial survey, for an ALTA, topographic, boundary all tied together, it is three-dimensional because we have to show where the underground utilities is running so you don't hit an underground utility. That's very important on doing an ALTA to see where the utilities are, if you've got any outside an easement. And utilities companies were notorious years ago of putting water and sewer lines in and not documenting where they were and not obtaining easements. Property boundary surveys, this falls true for what we do in our ALTA surveys. We look for locations of all boundary monuments that were found or set, any apparent improvements, recorded easements, recorded means of ingress, egress, lines of occupation, deed restrictions, unresolved conflicts, all the apparent boundary encroachments. We put that all on there, but we have to research that. Now, it gets me to ALTA surveys. I want to say something in here that a lot of y'all may not know. In your minimum standards for ALTA surveys, you have to provide, as a title attorney to the surveyor, the adjacent deeds. Do you? Yes. You'd be surprised at when I say, send me your title commitment, all your supporting documents. They send it to me. I said, well, where's your adjacent deeds? Oh, you do that. I said, no. We do it. Because I learned in dealing with Jim, everybody up in Knoxville, is that I research, Jim researches, and we work together. I might find something that Jim doesn't find. I was going to say something tacky, but I won't. Jim, normally Jim would find something, I wouldn't find something, and we would trade back and forth, and that made our survey work and title work even better by working together. So I'm involved in one right now that we can't find some deeds on some easements, and we've just now found out that they probably don't exist. So we're in the process of now trying to find out what we need to do. Okay, the altered requirements. You go back and you look at 1986. There was a rewrite. Go back to 1962. That was going into some of the first alters. And every year, you see the number of revisions. 88, 92, 97, 2005, 2011, 2016. You don't know how many requests I have got I've received in the last 2 years from attorneys. I don't see any of you in here that have done that, but they have sent me a request for doing a 2011 Alta survey. I said, no, I can't do it. Oh, yeah, we need. I said, no, I can't do it. 2016. Oh, standards changed? I said, yes. So there are some title attorneys that may not be involved in the Land Title Association. Yes. Yes, by state law. There's a state law that whenever we find a problem with a boundary line that affects the adjacent property owner, that we have to talk to them about it. If it's a gap or if it's an overlap, an encroachment. I present it to the title attorney, present it to the client. The title attorney is not my client, correct? Your client is my client. So I have to disclose, hey, here's what we found, but then I say, okay, I've got to talk to the adjacent property owner to explain to him what I have found. I have found it's better for me to talk to them about the survey, what's going on, than the attorneys. Do y'all all agree with me? Hey, I'm right. See, I'm right. That's where you have to be a real politician in trying to make them understand why they don't have all the property that they're supposed to have. But that's, Alta, but in Tennessee, it's a state requirement. I've had, regardless, I had 4 years ago, we had a client that did not want me to talk to their title attorney. It's just sort of like putting my hands behind my back and putting a muzzle on me, and as Jim knows, you can't muzzle me. I found a way to go around so everybody find out what's going on. I'm sorry, because there was a property issue with a gap there, and we needed to take care of it. If it's a small gap, you still need to take care of it if it's an overlap. Okay. Interpretation of land descriptions. That's one of the toughest jobs that you as title attorneys and us as surveyors have, is trying to interpret land descriptions. Work with land descriptions that go back into the late 1800s. We did a survey. Our firm was hired to do the closeout of Brushy Mountain State Prison. That property was given to the state of Tennessee in 1896. Handwritten deed recorded in Morgan County Register of Deeds office. So we started doing the survey. Now, you got to remember, surveyors in 1896 surveyed to different accuracy than the surveyors do now. So we had to take into account how they survey. I just can't say, okay, let's go out here and we'll put down what the deed says. You can't do that, because the deed then, distances and bearings, will be different than what we have now, because we've got better accuracy on things. So when we went through that survey, we had 2 houses that people had built onto the prison property, and the prison property ran right through the houses. The people knew they were doing it, and they kept on doing it. We had one house that set totally into the property, but there was a little caveat in the deed that says, hereby excluded 1 acre to so-and-so. Where's that 1 acre? And we called it the lost 1 acre. And the only way we would go back and find out if we felt comfortable that that was the 1 acre is we went back to the old topo maps, USGS topo maps, as far back as we could go. That house was there. Couldn't go back to the 1800s, but we assumed that was it. So we talked to the state about it and worked up an agreement on it. Then we had a cemetery, that private cemetery set totally on the property owned by the state of Tennessee. They had a deed for it, but it was included in the property of the state of Tennessee. We had another piece of property that a surveyor had surveyed to a fence line and called that the boundary line, but he encroached 5 acres of the state of Tennessee into the property that this gentleman was buying. We had everything that we could find on a survey was on that one. It got down to it. Now, we were doing this without a title search, without a title report, title commitment, or anything. We were researching the records. Finally, I said, let's see if we can find something that shows some of these problems we're finding. Maybe there's been some outconveyances we haven't found. I was so happy. They called Tennessee Valley Title, and they did the search on it and provided it to us. There wasn't anything they found any different than what we found. So I felt really good at that point. So we had to go through and work with them to resolve all of these conflicts. And you cannot claim adverse possession against the state of Tennessee. So we got into land swaps. We got into the state just saying, well, we don't want the cemeteries, we'll just give it to them. And then the guy that got the extra acreage, the guy surveying the fence line, he happened to be a retired guard from Brushy Mountain. So they worked out a deal with him. He'd pay so much for that extra property. So we went through all these issues and resolved them. But we did other work up there besides that, and the fee on that project to us was about $280,000. About $140,000 of it was survey work. Most expensive survey I've ever worked on. But it was absolutely a bear of a survey. I was lucky, though. Frozen Head State Park joined up to it. And Larry Bulliner in Farragut, a good friend of mine, he had conducted the survey on that. So that helped me. I had his work to rely upon, too. Okay. Description elements in deeds. We go through the caption, the body, augmenting clause, qualifying clause, controlling clause. All of these right here, if you go back in to the Bible and read the description of the land of Israel that was given to the 12 tribes, you will have a caption, a body, augmenting clause, qualifying clause, and controlling clause. Get your Bibles and you go home and read it and see if I'm not right. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with all of this because that's, okay. It's 9:40 and I could stand up here for 3 hours talking to you about this. And I'd probably stand up here longer than Jim Bonner would stand up here. And I told Jim I was going to pick on him today because I haven't seen him in 10 years. And as soon as I walked in here yesterday, I heard this voice. And I walked out there and said, Lisa. I said, Lisa, is Jim Bondard here? She said, oh, yes. Can't you hear him? And my wife, we've been married 47 years, and she would go to the courthouse and research deeds for me. And she couldn't reach to the top, and a lot of attorneys up there, I'm sure Jim was one of them, helped her get the books off the top of the shelf. And she said to tell you hi, Jim. And I had been married 47 years, and I've learned after 47 years I can ignore anything. Because when I go to the golf course, if anybody makes a noise, I say, I can ignore anything. I've been married 47 years. But I said that to my wife one day, and then she sort of smacked me. And she's only 4'11". Okay. These are the orders we go through, and this may not be in your book because I sort of changed things up after listening to everybody yesterday. I'm going to get into some information that would help you more than what describing surveys and going through altars. These are our controlling elements when we look at a survey. If it calls for a survey, we go to that survey. We take a look at it. Now that survey, we do not use the last survey. We back up because we have to follow the original surveyor. I cannot follow the last surveyor. Does that make sense? Last surveyor is not the original surveyor. I have to try to go back and follow the original surveyor to make sure that the last survey was done properly, because you may go back in the deeds and research. You can't find the actual copy of it, but you got to look at the deeds. Sometimes you have to know the surveyor's still alive. You go find him and see if he's got a copy of it. But then if you can't, then you've got to use the adjoining. You have to use the adjoining deeds. You have to use everything. Everything. Natural monuments. A natural monument is a tree. A natural monument also is a set stone. If you ever heard of a set stone, I put it into that category. It's not artificial, it's a stone. And you'll find farmers went out there and put stones down at the fence corner and said, there's my property corner. And that's a set stone. If I find a set stone, it's off by 20 or 30 feet from what the deed has, I'm going to ignore the 20 or 30 feet. I'm going to use that set stone because that was put there. That was the original marker. If it calls for a tree, if it called for a, let's say in 1942, it called for a 12-inch hickory tree. Am I going to go look for a 12-inch hickory tree? I don't think so. We will look in the area, and if we see a tree that looks like that and maybe it's got some blazes on it, we'll tie it in. We'll locate it. If we've got a tree that, okay, that looks more like where that would be, this tree would be about the proper age, so we might even core drill it and pull the core out and count the rings in it to determine the age of the tree versus what was there. Artificial monuments are the iron rods, iron pipes, anything that people put down, axles, whatever, to mark property corners. We do not honor those unless they're spelled out in the deed. If it's not called for in the deed, who put it down? Okay? So we don't know how it got there. All of a sudden you have a deed calling for a tree, then the next deed calls for an iron rod. Sometimes you'll find the tree and the iron rod is 10 feet away from where the tree is. There's more to surveying than just going out there and gathering data. I think that's the point I'm trying to make to y'all. Call for adjoiners. We have to use the adjoiners. That's very critical to everything we do. Call for a distance over a direction. It used to be that they could survey the distances better than they could do the direction. So we would use distance as a controller. Then we'd use direction. Call for area. You do not insure acreage, do you? Do you insure acreage? Okay. We say plus or minus. And where it says exceptions, we put down here, area is shown as plus or minus because it's got to be that, because I can't say it's going to be exactly that number. People will buy it based on the acreage, but I say, hey, this we're giving you plus or minus. That's the only thing on the survey today I will put plus or minus on will be acreage. And you don't insure it anyway. But we're required to put it on there. Call for coordinates. If you see surveys that have northern neesings on there for the state plane coordinate system in the state of Tennessee, and it's 600,000 and 1.7 million, and those are the coordinates and the surveyor puts on there, disregard them. They're normally put on there for planning commissions because they want to see that. But the coordinate system in the state of Tennessee are not controlling points for locating property corners. All right? So it falls at the bottom of the list. General principles, let's see. I want to get to some things that will be. Okay, here it gets into the adjoiners, evidence of maps, evidence research obtained, survey of parcel, evidence of existence and location of old monuments, and the history of possession. It gets back in this. How many's dealt with junior senior rights in here? Has anybody dealt with junior senior rights? The first piece of property coming out of a large piece of property, they're going to be senior over the rest of it, even though they came out of it, okay? And that's very critical when you're dealing with overlaps and gaps. If I sell 1 acre out of 100 acres, that 1 acre is now senior. The 99 acres is junior. It's the first one coming out. Mm-hmm. Then you divide out another one, and it's junior to the first senior, but it's senior to the junior. What? We've researched back 100 years to try to determine who's got junior, senior rights. And that's when I finally say, hey, I says, this is the best we can determine. Sometimes we can't determine it. Oh, issue survey RO report, number 10. In the state of Tennessee, for the standards of practice, we are not required to issue a survey drawing when we conduct a survey. Do you think that's true? Yes, it is. I can go out there and conduct a survey the property, put new corners down. I put a cap on it that's got my name on it, and say, I thought I turned that off. Sorry about that. Wanted to have this phone up here so I wouldn't go over my 1 hour, and I've only got 13 minutes left, so I'm going to have to hurry. Issue surveyor report. No, we do not have to issue a survey. I wish every surveyor had to issue a survey when he did it, and that it would be recorded somewhere. We've got too many surveys out there floating around that aren't recorded. You can have... What? Okay, I'll make my spill then, okay? For years, I would go and pull out the warranty deed, find a survey reference. I'll go out to the property and say, oh, wait a minute. Somebody surveyed this within the last, 10 years. I go back, it hadn't changed ownership, so I go back to the trust deed. Then the trust deed would reference the last survey, and there would be a difference. So to me, surveyors, and I've tried to push our surveyors to do this, there needs to be, when a surveyor does a survey, it needs to be recorded somewhere. You talk about taking care of problems. I'm going to take care of this real fast. Y'all, Jim, at 10 o'clock, will you remind me to shut up? You think you'd be happy to do that? Does he need an opportunity? Okay, let's see. This is a problem we're running into now is we're surveying properties in Nashville that are into the 1890 subdivisions, and there's not a lot of property corners. So we're having to use lines of possession from the standpoint of the buildings and fences and everything to try to determine property lines. When you're working off an 1890 map or a 1900 map, people have built fences and built their houses. We've actually established property lines off the way the houses are built, because we knew the houses were built parallel to the property lines and perpendicular to the front. So we've had to do that. You have to use your best judgment and give your opinion. Fred, must be remembered that a fence is but a fence until it is called for as being the boundary or controlling line. We have too many surveyors that are fence line surveyors. They find a fence, and there's the boundary line. We've done a lot of surveying for Billy Frisk, Senator Frisk's nephew, and his brother-in-law, Chuck Elton. They buy these big pieces of property, and there's fences. And surveyors have gone in there, and it's supposed to be a nice straight line, and they've got a fence. They've gone like this, and the fence is not the property line. It's that straight line. It's property line. So it's created people, surveyors, some surveyors just go with the fence. Unless that's called for in the deed, no, I'm not going to go there. Okay, effective communication. And this was from the seminar I was telling you back in 1965. And lawyers think the land surveyors don't understand what a lawyer does. Let me tell you, I understand what you do. And I hope after today you'll understand what the surveyors have to do. And I think most of you do, because you are the best attorneys in the state of Tennessee. Because you're there every day, just like I said, the dirt. You're working with the dirt all the time. You're a dirt surveyor. You're a dirt attorney. I'm a dirt surveyor. We are there every day doing our jobs. We're not running to the courthouse to defend somebody or to file a lawsuit against somebody. Some of us will get into being witnesses on lawsuits, on boundary problems. That's part of the game. But so much of what I've learned has been after I was out of school and I started becoming a surveyor, and what I learned from my grandfather, and I'm still learning today. There's a lot of young people that do not understand that you need to listen to us older folks and the people who have the experience and still read. Because just because you've gone to school does not make you an engineer or a surveyor or an attorney. I've always said you get a license, hang it on the wall, it says you're a professional. That's all it says. It doesn't mean that you're a professional. You need to act like a professional and keep doing what you're supposed to be doing. All right. You can see I love that. But I think I can honestly say I'm one of the few surveyors that when I complete a survey, I'll send it to you, but if there's some real problems, I like to come to your office, sit down and talk to you about it. Face-to-face is a lot better. In the location of land boundaries, the surveyor also locates the boundaries of adjoiners. He is in a quasi-judicial position that he is obligated to consider the rights of others even though they do not pay him a fee. Think about that. I put a property corner down out there. That property corner is not just for my client. It's for the adjacent property owner. It's for the rear property owner. So I am representing everybody. I always enjoyed doing these small subdivision lot surveys for loan closings. We did a full boundary. We'd get out and we'd be about 12 feet back from the curb. Metal detector, and start digging in the flower bed. The lady of the house would run out and say, whoa, what are you doing? I said, I'm hunting your property corner. She said, no, it goes to the road. It goes to the road. I said, no, ma'am, it doesn't. It's about 12 feet back. And all of a sudden, I keep digging, and then I find and show it to her. And she says, well, my husband said it was at the curb. He told me I could plant there. I said, well, talk to him. So that's happened so many times. Okay. Adequate technical and legal publication references. I've got Black's Law Dictionary sitting on my desk. And then I have all of these other references here. I pull these out and look at those, and I make copies of them. But there are plenty of books out there for surveyors that go through the law for surveyors. This is a land description. That's the way it should be written. It shouldn't be, I've got it really double spaced, I've got it spaced out, but I like each individual line because when you read this, as old as I am, you go out here and you got to come back here, you got to go back here, and it's hard to read and you're going to miss something. Again, get back to the linear era, make sure that the surveyor is putting on there what it actually is, not just say, hey, it's 1 in 10,000. See this photo here? This is in Knoxville. The house sitting right here, and then you got a power line over here. I was laying that house out for a builder, and this was a subdivision where they tore out a bunch of double wides that were put in there for the World's Fair. And so we were laying houses out there. 2 builders bought the lots. So my builder was having me lay that house out, and he came out there, and I had the footer all staked, and he said, Ken, says, why am I so far from the center of this power line? I said, well, it's a 100-foot easement. It's 50 foot from it. He said, well, what about the house across the street? Now, you see this pole over here, this house right there now is in the correct place. But that house was encroaching 25 feet into the power line for the North City Utility Board. I looked at the house, I said, well, they've got a problem. And Eddie was the man that dug the footers, and Eddie was a good old country boy, had a couple of teeth. Seriously. Good friend. He looked at me, he said, boy, they do have a problem, don't they? I said, yeah. I said, wait till they sell that place. Well, guess what? They sold it. The lady bought it. You know what she didn't do? She didn't get a survey. So a few months later, she decided she was going to put a fence up, so she got a survey. The surveyor came out there and said, ma'am, do you know that your house is sitting 50 foot into this easement? No. Builder said everything was okay. I said, I've got a warranty deed. Warranty? Warranty means it's okay, right? I said, no. Okay. Surveyor laid it out wrong. So the builder bought the house back. The surveyor then, this is down close to Farragut, the surveyor then had to buy the house from the builder, or his insurance company did. And guess what they did? They hired a moving company out of Virginia that specialized in picking houses up. This was on a solid concrete floor. This was not a crawl space. They dug under there, went 5 foot on center, went through there, jacked the house up, moved it over onto a footer they dug. It cost almost as much as the house did. The lady didn't live there. She went off and bought her another house, but I would not want to live in that house knowing it was jacked up and moved. Harry Frazier, who was head of the North City Utility Board, was a surveyor. And I called him about this. He said, Ken, you're doing some work out there? I said, yeah. He said, well, you're not putting yours in those easements, are you? I said, no, sir, I'm not. No, definitely, that wasn't me, because I know better than that. I was teaching at Pellissippi State Community College when this happened, and some of the surveyors, I was telling them about it, and they said, who was it? I said, I'm not going to tell. Well, they came back in and they said, hey, we found out who it was, and they mentioned your name. I said, okay. Now, this is one that is near and dear to me. See those 2 pins on there in that red line? That's a sewer line going underneath that building. Again, this is in Knoxville. New. Well, it's the ones I can remember, but this one is special to me. My daughter had graduated from Milton College and just started nursing. And she decided that she wanted to move out of an apartment. She wanted to buy a townhouse. She owned property in the front and the rear. So she signed a contract on this, and she told the builder, said, I want to get a survey. Oh, you don't need a survey. You don't need a survey. You don't need a survey. She said, I want to get a survey. She used to survey with me. So I went over there, and I did the survey by myself, which I did with robots. I walked out back. I saw that manhole down here, and I saw that manhole up there, and I stood on that, and I said, I can see the manhole because of the house. Popped the lids on it, right underneath the house that we go. I went ahead and drew the survey up, gave it to the real estate agent because we wanted to get our money back. Because there wasn't any way they could move that. They'd have to put another manhole in. They said, oh, well, they can take care of that. They can insure that. And I said, no, we're not going to insure that. She's not going to live there. So I go over there, and they want me to talk to the builders. I'll go over there and talk to the builders, and I'm talking to them about it. I said, you sure you're right? And I said, yes, I'm right. That T-shirt. So anyway, I'm standing there, and I walk them out there and show it to them. They're standing there looking and said, wait a minute, what's your last name? I said, Church. The girl buying this, her name is Church. I said, that's my daughter. So we got her down payment back, her earnest money. And I told them, when I left, I said, now, I survey in this area every day. I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, do my survey work, deliver my surveys. I would be in the field by 7, 8 o'clock, and then I'd be home at 7. I would sleep 4 hours. Jim knows this, of the amount of surveys I would do. I would sleep 4 hours, and I'd keep doing my survey work. I would do as many as 5 or 6 surveys like this a day. It wasn't that I was doing them fast. I was efficient about it. I knew what I had to look for. I told these gentlemen, I said, now, I'm through here all the time. If I see you've sold this house, I'm going to go up, I'm going to ring the doorbell, and I'm going to ask them, did they disclose to you that your building is across the sewer line? They said, you'd do that? I said, yes, I sure will, because now you have to disclose it. I just didn't trust them, because then they said, well, would you lay out the rest of our work for us in here? I said, no, I'm not going to touch that. I said, because that'd be conflict of interest. I pointed out a problem to it. You take care of it. They went to the utility company, and the utility company said, no, and I knew them too. Said, no, it says, we can't do anything for you. You're going to have to move the sewer line. I think they eventually moved it. But they did finally sell it. But I believe they moved it, so I would trust them with it, okay? Downtown Nashville, that is the James Robinson Hotel, which they're now renovating. In the corner of that building is setting over from the old convention center. We got the job to survey that with Gresham Smith. So we go down there and start our survey. Barge Wagner, Sumner, and Cannon did the original survey. And then there were some surveyors in between. They were both from Alabama, had state licenses, and they did it through one of these clearing houses, which I really dislike these clearing houses because you need to work with a surveyor directly instead of going through a clearing house. They had the property corner going a foot inside the James Robinson Hotel, and they showed it that way on their survey. The deed for the James Robinson Hotel called for the corner of the building running with the building, not a foot into it. They had it running in an angle in there. So we went back to the original deed for the James Robinson Hotel. It called for the corner. When we tied that corner in and other markers we had, everything fell in place. It was beautiful. I called the surveyor. It wasn't the title attorney. Called the surveyor, and I told him what I found. He said, yeah, I guess it's better you can just go ahead and make that make that correction. I said, well, why'd you do that? He said, well, I was just going off the last survey. The surveyor before had done the same thing he did. No disrespect to Alabama, but they were both from Alabama. I've got a young surveyor working for me now. He just got his license. He graduated from East Tennessee State, and he's from Alabama, and he's a great guy. So that's some issues that we run into in doing our work and how detailed we have to be. And when we give you a fee, a lot of people look at, man, that fee's awful high. It's awful high. Well, think about everything that I've just described to you. Sometimes you're going to get what you pay for if you go to the lower fee. I was a mom and pop operator until I came to work at Gresham Smith and Partners, so my fees could be low. Gresham Smith and Partners, I still kept my fees there because we're efficient. One-man survey crews using robot or GPS instead of 4 guys. We're efficient in the office using Civil 3D. So we really push the technology as far as we can. And people are really surprised that somebody at my age would be embracing technology like this. But embracing it, Jim, looking at your watch, is it time? Okay, all right. I hope I didn't mess anybody up today. But my email address is pls1004@gmail.com. If you send me an email, I'll be happy to send you this PowerPoint because there's a lot of other stuff in there. One last thing, Jim. I have made presentations to attorneys and paralegals before, and it's one of the most enjoyable jobs I think I've ever had, of being able to communicate with attorneys and paralegals, because you totally understand what the law is all about in being attorneys. Thank you.